Meantime, let's turn back to our conversation about what's happening outside the diplomatic front in terms of putting pressure on Iran right now. There's a lobbying effort underway to push corporations who have any ties at all to any sort of business involvement with Iran to sever those ties. We've been speaking with Mark Wallace, who's with us here. He's from United Against Nuclear Iran. Now, this is a lobbying group. Who is funding this?
Well, first of all, lobbying group I think is misplaced. It's really an activist group. We have over 27,000 people starting from zero that joined us, that signed up on our website, that are all, when we, for example, put out a press release or call on a company, whether American or European based and doing work in the United States, those activists really bring a lot of pressure to bear on this company. So we were activist based.
We're looking at some of the past leaders here on our screen. They include the former head of the CIA, Jim Woolsey, Richard Holbrooke as well. So definitely some ties to former politicians, former government leaders here. Is this a government funded?
It's not. We're privately funded. It's a 501c3, not-for-profit. Our contributions are confidential because a lot of people who support this, and we get contributions from the broad spectrum of the general public, don't want to be confronting a regime. But we have great bipartisan roots. As you saw from that list, Ambassador Holbrooke, Jim Woolsey, Dennis Ross. We have a bipartisan advisory board right now that really represents a broad spectrum of policy, a little bit of politics, but mostly policy and academia, all of whom are really united in the notion that businesses should not be doing business in Iran at a time when the international community is trying to isolate Iran.
So tell me why you think this kind of degree of isolation is effective, because you know the arguments against sanctions and you know the arguments against severing all relations, which is that isolation doesn't help, foment pressure. It actually just can consolidate control for those in power. It didn't really work in Cuba. You could argue there are already sanctions against Iran. Why do you think this is an effective way to focus?
Well, I think we could have an entire show on the nature of sanctions and which sanctions are effective and not. When you talk to people in the business of sanctions, targeted sanctions are the best. And we think that we're doing the most targeted sanctions, targeting specific businesses, asking them in a non-demagogic way to pull out of doing business in Iran and isolating that regime. That regime likes doing business with the West, is dependent upon doing business with the West, and it needs revenue and the support of those companies. With the unrest that you saw in the wake of the election, we think was a big part of that sanctions effort, or a reaction to that sanctions effort. So we think it works in Iran.
And yet it was through an American corporation that so many credited, giving a voice to some of the popular unrest in Iran. Having Twitter have access to that market via the internet actually was a good thing.
We haven't targeted Twitter yet.
There you go. Well, some would hope you wouldn't there. But tell me who you are targeting right now.
We've been operating a string of campaigns. Late last year, we entered into, after extensive negotiations, an agreement with General Electric, where General Electric agreed to forego its business in Iran, while at the same time keeping some medical work that it was doing in Iran and donating the proceeds to charity. Siemens, we've seen, we asked Siemens to take various steps. Siemens announced that it was withdrawing from new business in Iran. The Huntsman Corporation recently agreed to stop selling polyurethanes into Iran. Most recently, we did Caterpillar, as you mentioned. We have a discussion underway that's sort of playing out in the press with Ingersoll Rand. And we have a long list of these companies on our website called the Iran Business Registry. And Ingersoll Rand is where you're most focused right now. That's correct. All right. Thank you so much for coming in. Interesting conversation. We're going to continue to track it. That's Mark Wallace, president of United Against Nuclear Iran.